Many gratitude to our ancestors, and we are here in the homeland of Wolastoqiyik, and today we are around a monument where one of our grandmothers, Dolores Aquin, who was a residential school survivor, came, and the Wabanaki women put the monument here to honor her and her family and all the survivors and those ones that did not survive the residential school. So today is a day in coming together to pay our respects, and that we never forget about the past and the traumas of our ancestors.
Indigenous children right across this country were sent to residential schools because of government policies and church cooperation, which actually was designed to do away with the Indigenous identity. The residential school program actually began in 1885, and it lasted until the last one closed in 1996. Some of the numbers that have come up to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is 150,000 children. And that was really only a fraction of all Indigenous children across this land at the time. However, 3,200 children died in that span of time. And many of these graves have not been found or located. And many of the parents were never notified that their son or daughter died while, in fact, in residence.
Orange Shirt Day acknowledges and kind of pays tribute to Indian residential schools and the trauma that they cause to Indigenous people, their communities, their families, and kind of that everlasting impact that it gives for each generation after theirs.
The lasting impacts of residential schools is still continuous as of today. And what is it? Well, there was a lot of identity that was lost. These children were not brought up in love. So they didn't know what love was. They didn't know what it was like to be a mom and dad. They didn't know what it's like to be a parent themselves later on when they became parents. And so there are still these lingering effects that exist in communities and even in families. Like, it's a generational thing. And so that is probably the most destructive thing that happened, let alone loss of Indigenous identity and the feeling of failure, the feeling of displacement, the feeling of loneliness. And the list would go on and on. I mean, there's been such psychological damage with all that has happened. That's why it's going to take a long time for healing and reconciliation to take place.
It is incredibly hard to listen and kind of take in these hard topics and conversations, but I continue to educate people on the importance of that and why it is so important for each of us to at least try to understand and try to have compassion for those Indigenous families and people.
The importance of Orange Shirt Day is to make sure that the experience that Indigenous students, children, suffered during the span of over 100 years is not forgotten. It should never be forgotten. And that's why we have to celebrate that there has been survival. And that these people, even though they're deeply wounded spiritually and psychologically and physically, that life goes on. And it's important that we realize that this very dark period of history in Canada should never be forgotten, and make sure that never ever happens again to anyone else as well.
I think for fellow students of mine, my only request is that you think about it sometime throughout the day. Maybe take a few minutes to look up the Orange Shirt Day campaign, see how it started, see why it started, and really try to put yourself in a place where you're willing to listen and learn.